July 17, 1918. A family of 7 walks down basement stairs, believing they're being moved to safety. In less than 20 minutes, they would all be dead. The execution that would end 3 centuries of Romanov rule and send shockwaves across the globe was about to begin. But what really happened in those final, terrifying hours, the truth is more brutal than you could ever imagine. The summer of 1918 was suffocating in Ekaterinburg, Russia. Inside the Ipatiev house, known ominously as the House of Special Purpose, the once mighty Romanov family lived their final days in captivity. Tsar Nicholas II, his wife, Alexandra, their 4 daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, and their hemophiliac son, Alexei, heir to a throne that no longer existed. For 78 days, they had endured humiliation, uncertainty, and the growing realization that their fate was sealed. The guards no longer showed even pretended respect. They scrawled obscene graffiti about Alexandra on the walls. They made the former emperor of all Russia clean his own toilet. But on this particular July morning, something felt different. Commander Yakov Yurovsky had arrived at the house with new orders from Moscow. Secret orders. Orders that would change history forever. Lenin himself had given the final authorization. The Romanov dynasty had to end completely. No survivors, no martyrs, no pretenders to the throne. As the day wore on, the family went through their normal routine, unaware that executioners were being assembled just floors below them. Yurovsky had handpicked 11 men from the local Cheka secret police and Hungarian prisoners of war. He briefed them carefully. Each man would be assigned a specific target. There could be no mistakes, no survivors, no witnesses. Dr. Eugene Botkin, their loyal physician, Anna Demidova, the Empress's maid, Alexei Trupp, the valet, and Ivan Karitnov, the cook, had remained faithful to the family even in captivity. They had no idea they too were marked for death. The Empress spent the afternoon reading from her worn Bible, marking passages about suffering and redemption. Nicholas played cards with his daughters, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Young Alexei, weak from his hemophilia but in relatively good spirits, played with his spaniel Joy. None of them knew that 1,200 miles away in Moscow, the decision for their execution had been finalized hours earlier. A single telegram had sealed their fate. Proceed as planned. As evening approached, Yurovsky made his final preparations. The basement room was chosen carefully. Concrete walls that would contain the noise and absorb the blood. Revolvers were distributed and checked. Each executioner was told exactly where to aim. The Tsar and his son would die quickly. The women, well, Yurovsky had heard rumors about jewels sewn into their clothing that might deflect bullets. He prepared for complications. At approximately 10:30 p.m., Dr. Botkin was summoned. Yurovsky told him that unrest in the town meant the family needed to be moved to the basement for their safety until transportation could be arranged. It was a lie, but a convincing one. The family had been moved before, under similar circumstances. Within minutes, the family was awakened and told to dress quickly. No luggage would be needed, they were told. This would be temporary. Alexandra, whose legs had been bothering her, asked for chairs to be brought to the basement. Nicholas carried Alexei in his arms. The boy was having one of his painful episodes and could not walk. The 4 daughters followed, whispering among themselves. In the dim electric light, Olga looked around the sparse basement room with growing unease. "Why are there no chairs?" Alexandra asked. "You said there would be chairs." "They're being brought," Yurovsky replied calmly, though his heart was racing. 3 chairs were eventually produced. Alexandra sat heavily, exhausted. Nicholas stood behind her, still holding Alexei. The daughters clustered together near the wall. Dr. Botkin and the 3 servants were arranged along the wall. Anna Demidova clutched a pillow. Inside it were hidden some of the family's remaining jewels. Everyone stood in an awkward semicircle, waiting for instructions about their supposed transfer to safety. At 12:30 a.m., July 17th, Yurovsky stepped forward. "In view of the fact that your relatives are continuing their attack on Soviet Russia," he announced, reading from a prepared statement, "the executive committee has decided to execute you." The words hung in the air for a split second. Nicholas, confused, turned slightly and said, "What? What?" Those would be his last words. Yurovsky drew his revolver and fired directly into the Tsar's chest. Nicholas collapsed instantly. The other executioners rushed into the room and opened fire. What happened next was pure chaos and horror. Alexandra had just enough time to cross herself before bullets tore through her body. Dr. Botkin, trying to shield the family, was shot multiple times but somehow remained standing before finally falling. The servants screamed and tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. But then something unexpected happened. Several of the daughters were still moving, still alive. The rumors were true. Jewels and precious stones sewn into their corsets were deflecting bullets like primitive armor. Bullets ricocheted around the room. One executioner was wounded by his own bullet bouncing back. Olga and Tatiana were finished off with rifle butts and bayonets. Maria tried to crawl away but was caught and stabbed repeatedly. The sound of screaming, gunfire, and crying filled the small basement room. Young Anastasia had been knocked unconscious by the initial gunfire, but was still breathing. When one of the executioners approached to check, she suddenly opened her eyes and cried out. In panic, he stabbed her with his bayonet until she stopped moving. Alexei, incredibly, had survived the initial shooting, protected by his father's body. He was still breathing when Yurovsky noticed movement. 2 more shots to the head ensured the heir to the Russian throne would never claim his birthright. Anna Demidova had hidden behind her pillow, the jewels inside it deflecting several bullets. It took multiple bayonet thrusts before she finally succumbed. The entire execution had taken approximately 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. The basement reeked of gunpowder, blood, and death. 7 members of the Romanov family and 4 loyal servants lay dead in pools of blood. But the horror wasn't over. Yurovsky's orders were explicit. The bodies must disappear completely. No graves, no relics, no shrines. The Romanov dynasty had to be erased as if it had never existed. The bodies were loaded onto trucks and driven into the Koptyaki forest, 12 miles outside Ekaterinburg. There, in a clearing near an abandoned mineshaft, Yurovsky and his men began the grisly task of disposing of the evidence. First, they attempted to burn the corpses, but 11 bodies proved too much for their makeshift cremation. The fire burned for hours, but bones and recognizable remains persisted. In frustration and growing panic about discovery, Yurovsky made a desperate decision. He separated 2 bodies believed to be Alexei and one of the daughters, and burned them more completely at a second site. The remaining 9 bodies were doused with sulfuric acid to accelerate decomposition and destroy facial features, then buried in a hastily dug grave. To further confuse any future investigation, Yurovsky ordered his men to drive trucks back and forth over the burial site, compacting the earth and obscuring any trace of the grave. As dawn broke on July 18, 1918, 304 years of Romanov rule had officially ended, but the world wouldn't know for certain what had happened for decades to come. The Bolsheviks initially announced only that Nicholas had been executed, claiming the family had been evacuated to a safe place. For months, then years, rumors persisted that some family members had survived. Countless imposters would emerge, claiming to be Anastasia or Alexei. Hope persisted even when logic suggested otherwise. The location of the bodies remained a mystery for over 60 years. It wasn't until 1979 that amateur investigators, using Yurovsky's own memoir as a guide, discovered the burial site. Even then, the discovery remained secret under the Soviet regime. Only in 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, were the remains officially exhumed. DNA testing confirmed the identities of Nicholas, Alexandra, and 3 of their daughters. But 2 bodies were missing, Alexei and 1 daughter, believed to be Maria. The mystery continued until 2007, when the second burial site was finally located. Burned bone fragments and teeth confirmed the identities of the missing Tsarevich and his sister through DNA analysis. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized the entire family as martyrs, not for their political leadership, but for their faith in the manner of their deaths. The basement room where they died has become a pilgrimage site, and the Romanov family has been transformed from symbols of autocratic oppression into martyrs of Soviet brutality. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of this story isn't the violence of their deaths, but the intimate humanity of their final hours. Diary entries found later revealed a family that, despite their privileged past, had grown closer through suffering. Nicholas, once an ineffective ruler, had become a devoted father. Alexandra, previously seen as cold and distant, spent her final months caring for her son and teaching her daughters to find strength in faith. The 4 Grand Duchesses, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, faced their deaths with the courage that belied their youth. They had lived through revolution, abdication, imprisonment, and uncertainty, yet maintained hope until the very end. Their story reminds us that behind every historical event are real people with hopes, fears, and dreams. The Romanovs weren't just symbols of an old regime. They were a family who loved each other, who faced uncertainty together, and who died together in that basement room. The execution of the Romanovs shocked the world, not just because it ended centuries of monarchy, but because it represented a new kind of political violence, the complete elimination of an entire family, including children, for the crimes of their lineage. Their story continues to fascinate us more than a century later, because it represents the collision between the old world and the new, between tradition and revolution, between mercy and ideology. Today, the Romanov execution stands as a stark reminder of how quickly political situations can deteriorate, how easily humanity can be discarded for political expedience, and how the innocent often pay the price for the sins of systems they never chose. If this story of one of history's most shocking executions captivated you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We dive deep into the hidden stories behind history's most pivotal moments, bringing you the human drama behind the headlines. What other historical mysteries would you like us to investigate? Let us know in the comments below, and do not forget to like this video if you found it as compelling as we did researching it. The Romanov story didn't end in that basement room. It transformed into something eternal, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, the human spirit endures. And sometimes, that's the most shocking truth of all. Tell us which country or city you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.